Howdy, y'all, and welcome to another episode of the Stay Creative Podcast, a show dedicated to highlighting, promoting, and celebrating the unique art and soul of the many talented independent artists that I meet. Through making this show, I have strengthened an existing belief that you cannot have a conversation with a person about their passion without taking some of it for yourself. So this show is also dedicated to sharing insights, tips, and encouragement that are going to be beneficial to people in any stage of finding, refining, or perfecting their creative voice. Today, we will be talking with Neon M. He is a musician, singer, and songwriter who has found his own unique sound in blending an alternative rock background with a more recent interest in electronic elements. Together, they keep his music fresh but also familiar in a really enjoyable way. He will be sharing some of his journey as well as things he has learned along the way. So stay tuned. Obviously, we're all very excited to learn more about you, Neon. I'm very grateful for your time specifically, but I'm grateful for everyone who's taken a moment to listen now, or maybe you can't now, but you're listening to it later. I believe, I feel very confident in saying you will learn something that will give you a deeper dive into Neon's just artistic expression, his music specifically, and just his path as a human being. And I think that is something worth experiencing and sharing as often as we can with other people. I also believe that through this conversation, you're going to pick up things for your own creative practice that is invaluable. When we share, when we communicate, we grow through one another's experiences. And I'm very excited to grow through Neon's experiences today. I think it's going to be awesome. He's lived a life that I have not lived, so his experiences are going to mesh with ours in ways that we couldn't have picked up on our own. I would like to get straight into these questions, man. If you're ready,
let's do it. Let's do it.
Awesome. And if you've listened before, you know I like to start pretty generic right off the bat and just ask, who are you? So introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Matthew, but you probably know me better as Neon M. I've been making music under that name for just over a year. I think last weekend actually was my official first release as Neon M. Nice. So it's a very timely interview. But yeah, music has always been a big thing for me. I've made music under different names in my previous lives, but this is the current incarnation of me. And yeah, I live in Los Angeles. I have a wonderful fiance and 2 dogs.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, Neon as a project and as a concept had like a birthday. Did you do anything special to mark the occasion?
I honestly forgot. I was, I think Instagram or Facebook reminded me that on how it gives you your memories for on this day and so it reminded me that I posted my first song as Neon M a couple of days ago, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
That's awesome.
So I wish I had done something more to commemorate it, but time is so weird right now. What even is time? So I had my own little internal celebration, but nothing big.
Moving a little bit out of your just kind of personal background and where you are right now, I want to talk more about your earlier influences. When did you start making music? You've already explained Neon as a project is about a year old, but when was the earliest time you picked up the guitar, or maybe before that?
So I grew up in a very musical family. My dad sang and still does sing in a Southern gospel quartet. So some of my earliest memories are, traveling to these little tiny white churches in the middle of nowhere, Alabama, for his group to sing, and then all these other gospel groups. And I hated it. God, I hated it so much. No offense to people that like gospel music, but I could never get into it. But my dad loved it. So that kind of just instilled in me like a love of performing music. So I did some singing with him when I was younger, probably when I was like 7 or 8. I would, make a special appearance in the group to sing I think it was "He's Still Working on Me" is the name of the song. But then I got sang in some church choirs and things like that. But I got my first guitar, well, I think when I was about 15, and just started. I taught myself everything. Never took a lesson, and so that just kind of snowballed. That's always been one of my favorite instruments. And then in college, I studied musical theater, so I had to take piano lessons and theory and all that kind of stuff. So in some ways, music has really always been very integral in my life. I had a band in college as well. I briefly made music, just recording out of my bathroom in LA, like probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago at this point, that I never really did anything with. And then I took a long hiatus, and then I was like, I really miss making music. And so finally last year I broke down and got a DAW and an interface and mics and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of a nutshell of my musical background.
Man, that's excellent to hear. So a lot of the more electronic elements and just production value and recorded things that I've heard from you have probably been all in the last year or so.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, everything prior to that was just guitar.
Wow.
Nothing else. Yeah.
Yeah. You have really learned the DAW like an instrument quickly. Like, it's impressive the sounds that you get out of your guitar, your voice, and then a computer. It's really impressive. So talking about the I'm going to say like the negative influences musically in your life, like growing up in I'm sure a talented family who were into music that you weren't so much into. What kind of stuff were you into from that earliest time?
I think it's a classic story of your parents being ultra religious and conservative, and here you are listening to Metallica and Marilyn Manson and all that kind of stuff. So growing up, I listened to a lot of what my parents did, which is, stuff from the 60s, which I still love, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and everything like that. And so I grew up on a lot of that. And then I also have my sister who is 14 years older than me. So she was, listening to some of the stuff in the early 90s, like Nirvana, and then some of the more like early techno stuff that was coming out. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then don't think that we weren't going to go through this interview without me talking about Batman Forever. And then, along comes the soundtrack for Batman Forever, which just, I can never overstate how much of an influence that had on me as just my musical taste. It was fundamentally altering. Hearing those first few bars of "Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me" by U2, which sounds nothing like the rest of their music. I was like, what is this? It just seemed so edgy. And then it went into PJ Harvey, and then Massive Attack and Mazzy Star and Nick Cave and Sunny Day Real Estate. I mean, it just it's endless. And I was like, oh my God, this is music that I love. And so that just that sent me down a predominantly a rock path, I think, for a lot of my early years, which, led to me discovering, like Metallica and Tool and Incubus and, all that good, late 90s, early 2000s stuff.
Yeah.
And then, in high school, I think, the biggest influence for me would have been Jeff Buckley. I didn't discover him until, I want to say I was 17 or so. Someone gave me a mixed CD that had a few of his tracks on it. And that was another thing that was fundamentally altering for me. Because it was, everything I had listened to previously was a lot, on the heavier side, a lot of rock. And then Jeff Buckley comes along, and it's just this exquisite songwriting and beautiful guitar playing and his voice. I mean, my God. And so that kind of led me down the path where I'd say I am more today, which is opened me up to more styles of music like Radiohead and things that maybe are a little more refined than say Incubus from the Make Yourself era.
Yeah, you listed a family tree of things that added up to Neon someday. I think that's a very valuable thing to get into. I like that. Well, I want to ask, like, and it's cool that you've given us just kind of a moment, a turning point in your past. If you right now, as the grown up Neon that we all know, could send just a piece of advice to that young Neon, that young Matthew, who was just getting handed the Batman Forever soundtrack for the first time, what would that piece of advice be?
Oh man. Not to get, all dark, on this Saturday morning, but I think I would tell him, everything is going to be okay. I was very much a loner kind of a kid. I spent a lot of time by myself, just kind of lost in my own thoughts and in my music. And I always kind of felt like an outsider. And I think, one other thing that contributed to that is, growing up gay and Southern conservative United States, and feeling just, outside of everyone and everything. So it was kind of a lonely childhood. But, I think I would tell him, like, you know what, keep doing what you're doing. It's worth it. Like, you're going to find your people, your place in the world. And, just a couple of years. So don't worry about it. Like, it sucks right now, but it's going to be okay. That's, I think, what I tell him.
Yeah. That's encouraging to hear, you who have gone through the place you're describing, the lonely childhood, the other-ism of Southern America on anyone who doesn't think like Southern America. It's very encouraging to hear you talking about it from where you are now, from having found your people, from having found your sound, from having found where you feel you can be yourself, and I think I'm very grateful you've shared that, because I feel like there is in what you just said, there is a responsibility to people hearing you say it to help others feel that way now. I live in Tennessee, and every day I'm positive I pass somebody who feels like they are just waiting to find where they belong.
Absolutely.
But I get to help them in the smallest ways possible. I get to help them feel that way now, and that's something that I think the artistic community has almost a monopoly on those opportunities.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I mean, if you hear somebody struggling musically, they probably have something. I don't know. I'm going to use the word spiritual. They have something going on emotionally that they're trying to express. Yeah, and we get to help them. I love that, man. I'm really grateful for you sharing that with us.
Yeah, of course. It's an integral part of my story, so I might as well share it.
Yeah. Well, not to, I guess, deviate from the sincerity and realness that you have shared with us, but I do want to move into the first track that you're going to share today. Can you just kind of set up In the Blue for me and let us know what's up with it?
Sure. So just a quick backstory. I had a band in college. It was originally just me and my friend Leslie. We both bonded over our love of Mazzy Star, and like we just want to make like moody, depressing music. And so we just started writing music, and then she's the one who came up with the name for the band, Without a Cello. And I hated the name then, and I hate it now. It's a terrible name for a band. And it came from the guy she was dating at the time. She was like, yeah, I'm starting a band with my friend. And he was like, do you have a cello? And she was like, no. She's like, well, you can't have a band without a cello. And she was like, that's what I was like, that's not a band. Like, that's an orchestra. Like, what is going on? And so she was like, but that's our name. And I'm like, okay. So that was boyfriend number one. And then boyfriend number two ended up being our drummer. And they had a very toxic relationship. So we kind of had a Fleetwood Mac kind of thing going on. But anyway, that's a little bit of backstory. But with this album, my dad, as a gift to me one year, bought some studio time for us. Mm-hmm. And we recorded banged out 4 tracks in, 12 hours in this little studio in Alabama of some of our songs at the time. And this one was one of my personal favorites that I wrote. Yeah, so it's it's a little rough. It's a little rudimentary. I think I'm 21, maybe 20 in this. So yeah.
So let me ask this: did you, before we hit play here, did you write the majority of the songs in this project, or half and half, or?
Musically, I wrote everything. All the music was mine, and then my friend and I, Leslie, kind of like did 50-50 in terms of lyrics and singing. So she would do some and I would do some.
Awesome. Well, without further ado, fantastic.
That is such a throwback. It's hilarious. And all of that is still on Bandcamp, by the way. If you're interested in checking out the rest of Without a Cello, you can still go listen to it. Not the cheap. So.
No, I personally am. I think that it's crazy. I know some people in the chat while we were listening were remarking about how your talent level has been consistent from then to now. But I think like even just like some of the nuggets of your early style that I do hear in your newer stuff is also very consistently enjoyable. Like that there was I guess I want to say the same. Yeah, Jeff Buckley. That same subtle rocking enjoyability of that. Like I feel like that same thing going on in your music then and now as well. A lot of times when people share their first band, it sounds like garage thrash metal, but you've always kind of had I guess you've always kind of had a hand for exactly what it is you want to sound like. I dig that track.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm still the same person, So I think, now it's maybe just a little more a refined version of what I was attempting to do back then.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I can certainly hear the same influences coming through in just a slightly different proportion.
Right.
I like it. So speaking about just influences and maybe moving up to the present day, who are some things that you're into now? Like having recently gotten into using DAW and more electronic elements and things. What's some influences you've picked up maybe in the last year or so that have contributed to that?
Great question. I mean, honestly, my consumption of music outside of IMF has dwindled to a trickle. I definitely still I try to keep in touch with some things that are going on outside of IMF, but I'm just, there's so much good music being created by everyone here, and things that I'm constantly influenced by and being like just constantly pushed to try something new. Like, I mean, honestly, just even Av like saying, I think it was a couple of months ago, he said something about wanting to hear a little more of like an electronic influence on things. And I was like, okay, all right, I'll try that. And then I started doing it. I was like, oh, okay. Like, I think he's right. Like this is a great way to like kind of blend it in with my current sound to make it something a little different than just like, straight up like alt rock or something like that. So aside from that, I mean, I have for the past like year or so been really into something. It's a very obscure subgenre that I think is called like folk horror. I don't know how to describe it, but it's very experimental. It's like ambient folk, but like slightly, it almost feels like the music you'd listen to if you were watching a documentary about like something about occult mysteries or something like that. So it's and I have this playlist that I've been building of all these like just strange artists that are just making all this music that's a combination of acoustic and electronic stuff, and the sound design is just it sounds very simple, but it's the more you listen to it, the more you realize how much is actually going on there.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a big influence on me, is to not be so just straightforward all the time. Like sometimes all you need is a guitar and, what's the phrase? 3 chords and the truth or something.
Yes.
Which I'm a big fan of. But just as an effort to keep expanding and evolving, I'm trying to incorporate more things like that are maybe you don't hear on the first time around, and that you really have to dig deep. I'm asking a lot of listeners, to do something like that. So just trying to incorporate more things like that to kind of flesh out the sound a little bit.
Yeah. I really like that. And I feel like I have heard you talk about your kind of fandom of just the horror genre in general. Like, is that those are films you're also into, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, another big influence on my life was probably watching Halloween when I was maybe 5 or 6. Like, no 5 or 6-year-old should be watching Halloween or like any of these horror movies, but for whatever reason my parents were like, yeah, sure, whatever. Ruined my sleep for months. But like it definitely I think it made me like fascinated by these dark and horrible things. And in a way it's like you're kind of like facing your fears in a way. So it's like I was like terrified of it but also morbidly fascinated by it at the same time. So I don't want children, but even if I did, I would make them watch horror movies and ruin their sleep for months. I'm like, this is good for you. You're going to appreciate it later in your life.
Yeah. Maybe start with some goosebumps or something,
Ease them into it. Yeah.
That's awesome. But I just remember also being very much into the controlled sensation of fear. It's not, it's not like actual danger, but something in my guts thinks it is,
Exactly. It's like going, through a haunted house, like, it's all fake, but it still scares the shit out of you anyway. And you love it because of that.
Yeah. They're not allowed to kill me. You know, you can say that to yourself over and over again. Well, awesome, man. So sticking with the theme of just kind of the present, have to believe you are working on an album. You've got so many fantastic tracks that are currently in a somewhat disconnected form, you know, that they're up on SoundCloud, that they're in different places, but they haven't been wrapped in plastic and put to an image just yet, you know? So I'd like to know what's going on with you right now. What are you working on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, depending on the day, the time, my mood, what I had, you know, to eat last, it changes. You know, earlier this summer, you know, I was even, I think, talking to you, I was like, oh, I have this idea for this album. And I was thinking, I kind of have, if I were to look at my music, I would divide it into almost two different groups. There's things like Alabama Baby or Rapture that are a little more like just kind of straightforward alt rock kind of things, and which I love. You know, I wrote them, so I'm like, they're meaningful to me. But I also, like, in the past 2 months, have felt myself going into a slightly more hybrid direction of, like, you know, still having those elements of art of alt rock, but combining them with some more electro stuff, and that, I think, has been a good revelation for me. And, like, that's kind of, I think, where I want to go. And so I'm slowly but surely piecing together things like that will feel cohesive to go out on an album. And so, like, the next track we're going to share, I won't get too ahead of myself, but I'm thinking that'll be the opening track for the eventual album. So so it's in the works. I don't, you know, exactly know of how many songs yet, or if it'll be, you know, kind of a longer EP or a shorter album. I don't really know. But, you know, it's something I've always wanted to do, is to release an album. And, you know, for me, it's finding the right sequence. I could spend hours and days just, like, putting things in an order. Because we've talked about this before, where I think the sequence of tracks means so much, especially if you're listening to an album from start to finish. I mean, to me, that can make or break an album entirely. So I'm spending a lot of time trying to curate those sounds and make it something that you could listen to and tell a narrative from start to finish.
I really enjoy when bands do that in the more subtle way, because obviously a concept album is very rigidly put in an order, but even just an album of songs telling in individual episodic stories being put in a certain order where sonically and emotionally, you know, they flow well. I think that's very important. That's cool. Yeah, so it sounds like you probably have about all the songs you're going to need to make this album, but you're considering reworking them, rewriting them, things like that, and maybe writing some additionals too. I want to talk about what that process looks like, either from, you know, blank page to full song, or re-examining a song that you've written with your new ideas and new kind of mind on. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing that a lot lately, going back to older things, and, you know, I'm like, oh, there's some good stuff here, like the bones of it are there. And I've, you know, just looking at these, and I'm like, what piece from this could work as, you know, if I embellish it a little bit with some, you know, electronic elements. I think, you know, I always start pretty much with guitar. That is my instrument. And it's just how things come out of me naturally. So almost everything starts on a guitar, and then I find ways to, I'm trying not to rely on it as much. I mean, it's definitely, I love it. It's my favorite instrument, but I also know it can be a bit of a comfort zone. So in an effort to get out of my comfort zone, I'm trying to rely on it less, or use it, you know, more so as the songwriting, and then, you know, scale it back a little bit as I'm starting to, you know, piece everything together. I'm like, well, what could I replace this guitar line with that's not a guitar, you know? Yeah, so I'm going back. There are a few other new things I'm working on that I are kind of in the early stages that I think like, yes, this will work with that sound profile that I want to go for. But yeah, I mean, in terms of just like my general process, I don't think I ever like have anything in mind. I always just sit down and start noodling on the guitar until something comes out. I'm like, oh, that's fun. And then I just kind of, riff on that. Lyrics for me are just, sometimes they come just like that. And I'm like, wow, I feel like Shakespeare. This is just pouring out of me. And then other times I'm like, this is garbage. I'll write something and I'll rewrite it and rewrite it. So typically if it doesn't just click immediately, I know that I need to back away from it, because it's usually like when I'm out walking the dogs or on a hike or something, I'll have a moment where I'm like, I'll have like this moment of inspiration. I'll have to take out my phone and write lyrics down in the notes app, because I'll just have a moment where it all kind of becomes clear. So forcing it never works for me. So I just have to wait for those moments of inspiration to come.
It's interesting, one, that often when I ask that question, people will bring up, I start on this specific instrument. Like I start with my main sound, and I think that is worth memorizing for folks. It goes a long way to just use something that feels natural in your hands,
Mm-hmm.
But also I think it's interesting that your better songs come naturally to you. It kind of is how you're describing. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like the songs that you end up keeping are the ones that feel easy to write to some extent.
Absolutely.
And those ideas seem to come to you when you're not even touching the guitar, like you said, out on hikes with your dogs or something like that. That's a tip worth sharing, is like walk away from the guitar and see what comes to you,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, because, you get to a point where you're just, banging your head up against the wall, like trying to make something. And I think that's just not the right creative space for me. So it's like you said, taking a step back. And then you have those moments and you're like, oh shit, I need to rush home right now and jot this down or record this little snippet before I forget.
Yeah, I've had those moments. Luckily, I just walk my dog for the most part on the street where I live. It's like a back road, I can walk pretty far before I see anybody or anything.
Nice.
But I've had those moments too where I'm halfway to where I've said we're going and I'm like, I need to go back.
Right, yeah.
I have this idea. Yeah.
Drive the car around on the freeway. Cars chasing you. You're like, I have to get home and record this idea.
You have to explain to the police who pulled you over. Look, I'm writing the song, and he just understands. He's like, okay, got you. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, go on. Go ahead.
Awesome, man. I would like to move into what's becoming a regular staple of these interviews, a little bit of a game section, if that's something you're comfortable with.
Yes, let's do it.
Awesome. So to set this game up, I have called it Cover Pro because in the past you have done an open mic and also just released on your SoundCloud. You have a wonderful precision for doing cover songs that I think both honors the original, but also always sounds like you in a way that is very enjoyable and real. But with that in mind, I have gathered some cover songs from the YouTube, and I would like to play the intro of these cover songs for you in not their original style.
Okay.
And see if you can tell me what song they are before the lyrics come in.
Okay, let's do it. U2 1.
That is U2 1. Holy crap.
Yep.
That was really quick. What gave it away for you? Just the chord progression?
Yeah, that signature edge guitar chord progression. That one is pretty memorable for me.
Gotcha. That's excellent. I tried to stick to some mainstream hits by the artist I selected.
All right.
So it makes sense you were at least somewhat able to get that pretty quick. This one's weird. It's got like a whole weird build up at the beginning. Let me get it where we gotta have it. Okay, here we go. Hit and play now. Like that. All right. Do you have a guess?
I mean, that chord progression feels so familiar. It could almost be like that ukulele cover of "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." That's what it reminds me of a little bit. But gosh, it's like I know it sounds familiar, but I can't place it.
Yeah, I'm going to hit play. We'll let the first line go.
Must be your skin. I'm sinking in. Must be for real. 'Cause now I can feel.
It's Bush.
Are you a Bush fan? Yeah.
I love Bush.
That's the one, man.
Glycerin, right? Yeah.
Glycerin. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
All right. This
It's
last.
interesting. It's a very different sound for that song. Yeah.
All right. Here we go. Last one. This one, I am almost positive there's no way to guess it. So I'm excited to see if you do.
Okay.
All right. You got any guess?
Man. Nothing is springing to mind immediately.
Okay.
You may have best me on this one.
You're gonna know it in 1 second.
And I give up forever to touch you.
Some Goo Goo Dolls,
Yeah.
metal Goo Goo Dolls. Yeah.
Who knew we
Nice.
needed that on the planet? But we did.
Didn't know. I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, but obviously we did indeed, or else it would not exist. All right. So that was the three I had. You got 1 out of 3, and I will say the one you got was like a home run of getting them because you knew it before I even hit pause. So I'm very impressed by your ability to pick out that first song.
I'm a U2 freak. I love U2.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for playing. I'm going to say that first one was worth 3 points, so you actually did indeed succeed at the game.
I win.
Good job. Howdy again. I hope you are enjoying the interview so far. I wanted to direct your attention to the show notes, as always, for this little segment of the interview. There's something there to see. And this time, I just want to direct your attention more fervently towards the link tree of the Stay Creative podcast show. If you go in there, you're going to find links to a lot of things. Obviously, all of my own social media presence, an email address to contact me. But more important than that, there is links to the different partners in this indie music promotional mission that I've set out on. There are supporters of this exact show who are out making wonderful things. Somewhat Incognito, Boz, Lo-Fi Phone, Dream Eater, Moonglow, S2, Stripe McCoy, the Do Something Nice podcast. There's a link in there for them. So many wonderful things. Let me see. Life's Everyday Soundtrack. That's one that I've pitched before. You guys should definitely check that out. Bi-weekly artist profile blog by Boz. Boz is a talented dude. He actually interviewed me in a previous episode. So go there, check it out. It's a little overwhelming with how many links are there at first, but it's worth looking. Let's get back to the interview. This is the part of the interview that I just enjoy talking about the most often. I would like to know why you today, as who you are, make the music that you make. What is it that you're hoping your listeners get out of it? What is it you're hoping happens in your life based on the effort you give it?
I make music because I have to. It is, like I've mentioned, it's such an integral part of my life, listening to music, playing music, performing it. It's it feels like it's as important as breathing. Not to be dramatic or anything, but it's like, I think everyone has their thing that they're passionate about. And for me, it's always been music, and and not necessarily like, I think most people like music. It'd be kind of weird if someone was like, I don't like music, but it's just, like I was saying earlier, I went for several years where I wasn't doing anything creative. Like I wasn't had zero creative outlet at all, and it was terrible. I mean, I had all these ideas, and I kept like wishing and dreaming like, oh, I wish I could do that, and then I'd actually like to thank, my partner, Kyle. He, just got so sick of me one day. Like, he's like, why don't you just buy the stuff that you need? And I'm like, yeah, it's expensive and, everything. And he's like, it makes you happy. Do it. So I have him to thank, honestly, for Neon M becoming a thing. Because I probably wouldn't have bought any of this stuff without it.
Yeah, I'd say we all have him to thank. So we will we'll pass a card around later with thank you.
Yeah,
send it to him.
But yeah, it's just there are things within that that need to come out. It's like a form of therapy for me. Writing music, listening to music. So it's just really a form of self-love. And if other people enjoy it in the process, that just makes it all the better. But for me, it's more of a form of therapy.
Yeah, that's excellent. Would you say that it is, I don't want to use the word universally helpful, because some people, obviously, nothing is a universally helpful thing. Some people would hate the stress of trying to write a song, But would you say that it is worth giving it a try? Like, if it's not already something you find to be therapeutic, would you say somebody who's looking for an outlet might find it in just playing a cheap guitar?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, because you just, until you try, you really have no idea what's going to come out. Yeah. And you may surprise yourself. So I'm all about like people trying, if they're not musically inclined, pick something out. Like you can figure out, really basic chords on the piano without, knowing music theory or anything like that. So I think anybody can be, musically inclined if they just put in minimal effort. Like I said, you'd probably be surprised with what comes out.
But have there been any significant moments, specific instances when you realized your mood, your outlook, or just your feelings in general were changed through something you wrote, something you made, or even revisiting something that you created?
Wow, that's a great question. A lot of my songs are about anxiety, and like I was saying earlier, it's kind of a form of self-therapy, especially if I'm going through something particularly difficult, or if I'm I have struggled a lot with anxiety and depression over the years. So it makes its way into my music a lot. But it's almost like a form of exorcism. I'm not trying to perpetuate anxiety or make people anxious. It's more so of, it's kind of an empathy thing. Like if you are feeling anxious, know that like I'm feeling the same way. Other people are as well. Here's a song about that to know that you're not alone in the way that you feel.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, it does. It does.
But yeah,
I think the exact same thing. I think putting moments of self-doubt or pain or discomfort into your music, you'd think listening back to that, it would be bringing back up those negative feelings. But often it is very therapeutic or very cathartic. Cathartic.
Absolutely.
I often explain that all of my songs are like, almost letters written to myself,
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that almost all humans experience some of the same problems means someone else is going to hear what they need to hear from me talking to myself anyway,
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. That's awesome, man.
Love that.
Yeah. Well, I want to get closer to playing this upcoming track. But I always like to ask folks to give me and the listeners a piece of homework. And this can be an album or a book or a movie or a video game or just whatever it is you think we should all experience before we die. We won't even put a hard time on it. Just what's something that we should check out.
Oh, man. Okay. So I'll recommend one of my favorite albums of all time by an ambient composer named Harold Budd. probably, I would assume most people haven't heard of him, but he's done a lot of work with, like Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois. Like he's very much in that echelon of ambient composers.
Yeah.
But his 1991 album is called By the Dawn's Early Light, and it's all ambient, except for some spoken word poetry sprinkled throughout, but it is the most visually evocative music I've ever heard in my life. He grew up in the Mojave Desert in California, and if it doesn't make you think, if the music doesn't conjure up images of the desert and the beauty that is the desert at sunrise and sunset, then you're not human. So this is a good check to see if you're human or not. Listening to this album. Highly recommend. Like I said, it's probably in my top 5. It's surreal, it's gorgeous, it's strange, it's amazing. Listen to it now.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna hang up right now. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I will. I'll listen to it.
Let's just end the interview now. Everybody go listen to this.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. I really appreciate it. Well, I feel very excited to give you a moment to introduce this next track to us. Tell us some about Reunion.
This song is, I didn't realize this until recently, but it is unintentionally the new version of the song that was played earlier, In the Blue, from my band Without a Cello. It's thematically, lyrically, musically very similar. I never intended that to happen. But they're, I don't know, 15 years apart in terms of when they were written.
Yeah.
But they're basically, this is the big brother to that song. It's, has a little more of like electronic influence.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was totally unintentional. And so in the eventual Neon M album that comes out, whenever that is, I'm pretty much set that this is the opening track. So that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Heck
yeah, man. I am very excited to share this track with everybody, and I'm very excited for that event. Neon M album or Super EP, I'm going to call it for now.
Super EP, I like that.
Yeah, awesome.
White arcade, I often
Well, that was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. And I want to be, before the interview ends, I want to be clear. I have nothing against cellos. I think cellos are a beautiful instrument. If anyone ever wants to add cello to my songs, I'm happy, but I'm still not calling myself, I wouldn't call myself with a cello then. I wouldn't.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You know what would be really funny is if a cellist found your album by the act or project without a cello, downloaded it, recorded cello parts on the whole thing, and then
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and just destroyed the internet in one fell swoop.
Right. It would be the ultimate contradiction. It'd be like just break people's brains.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for sharing both of these tracks. Obviously, they're both fantastic, and I really love the idea of them being almost a check back in with the same feelings and thoughts and themes and concepts. I really like.
Yeah.
I like when artists have like part 1 and part 2 of certain songs. You know, I like that kind of just style of songwriting.
Yeah, and I like it even better considering it was an accident. I didn't even mean to do that. So
yeah. That's awesome. Well, Neon, I have been. This has been an extremely easy interview. Usually, I find myself very 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 nervous. But this has been like catching up. Grateful for your time and the music you're putting out there, and just your presence in our community as IMF, but also just the greater community of artistic people in the world, man. I'm really grateful for you. I'm grateful for your time. And I will end the call, man. If you have anything you'd like to say as kind of a parting remark to the family, I'm going to use that word again, including any kind of like place people should look. I'll of course link that in the podcast notes, but you can shout it out right now. Sure.
You can find me predominantly on SoundCloud. I have a very woefully out-of-date Bandcamp. Don't even bother going there. And I have one song on Spotify. Hopefully there will be more soon. But yeah, I mean, I agree. This has been super easy. It feels just like chatting with a friend because you are a friend. I consider all of you friends. This, not to get too sappy here at the end, but this Discord has been probably the best thing to ever happen to me, but especially this year, amidst all of this, it's just been really wonderful to have this space to come to where I can share with people and laugh with people. It means a lot, and Pax and Volps do such an amazing job of doing that. And I could shout out every single one of you, but thank you all for just being who you are. I love you all, and I'm happy to be here, and I hope to be around much longer.
Awesome, man. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, T-Rex.
Peace.
Bye, everybody.
I'm so grateful Neon was able to share some time, music, and experience with us today, and I'm very grateful you took a moment to listen. I hope you have heard something in Neon's music and story that encourages you to find your people and hold on to the truth that you belong, even if you don't feel like it right now. I also hope something in our talk today has encouraged you to give that instrument or poetry or short story writing, blog, painting, or your own podcast another try. Creating art is often a conversation with yourself, but it is one worth having frequently and without holding back. I hope to share some more time with you again soon. But until then, stay courageous, stay curious, and stay creative.